I thought a simple lamp was my salvation, but it turned my life into a haunted nightmare. I never should have opened that door. The moment the knob turned, a wave of chill washed over me, clutching my spine like ice-cold fingers. My heart raced as an unsettling silence enveloped the room. I had just returned home from a long day at work, eager to bask in the mundane glow of my tiny apartment. The scent of reheated pizza lingered in the air, familiar and comforting. Little did I know that peace would shatter in an instant. The lamp sat innocently on the side table, its glass surface gleaming under the dim light. I had stumbled upon it at a dusty old thrift store, drawn in by its unique design and allure. At first, it seemed harmless, a quirky addition to my living space. But as I flicked the switch, the light flickered ominously. A slight buzzing filled the air, something electric and restless. And then it began. Whispers curled around me like smoke, soft and secretive. I glanced around my apartment, shadows stretching in unusual ways. Was it just my imagination? Chills crawled down my arms. The sound of rustling Febreze, was it a hiss? Echoed from the corner. I squinted into the darkness, heart pounding, anxiety threading through my chest like barbed wire. I took a step back. The floor creaked beneath my feet. Objects began to shift. A picture frame at the edge of the table teetered and fell, shattering on the floor. My breath caught in my throat. My body screamed to run, but curiosity tied me in place. I peered closer at the lamp, half expecting a figure to materialize before me. Yet all I saw were shadows engulfing its brass base. Cold air danced around me, as if the very atmosphere held its breath, awaiting the inevitable. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown: 13, 14, 15 seconds. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. I could almost make out words, but they evaded me like a cruel joke. Something was in the room. Suddenly, a shattering crash broke the stillness. A drawer next to me flew open, spilling its contents onto the floor. My instincts yelled to flee. I stumbled back, my pulse a chaotic drum. "Stop!" I shouted, though my voice sounded small and weak. What was happening? There was no rational explanation, only mounting dread wrapping around me like a tight noose. Then, in the dim light, I saw it. A shadow shifting near the wall, more than just an illusion. It loomed, twisting and curling, taking shape. Couldn't breathe. My throat tightened, a lump of sheer terror. I blinked, hoping it was just my imagination. But as hard as I wished, the darkness didn't dissolve. My scream died in my throat as the figure lunged forward, and the lamp flickered violently. The world went black. Hey! Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. When the darkness receded, I found myself cocooned in silence, a heavy shroud pinning me down. I blinked against the familiar dimness of my apartment, but something was off. The shadows lingered, thicker than usual, groaning with a life of their own. I felt a shiver crawl up my spine. Had I just been dreaming? The taste of fear was still bitter in my mouth. The lamp perched innocently on the table, untouched, unchanged. My rational mind began to speak, insisting this had to be a trick of the light, an ordinary lapse in sanity. But something within me knew otherwise. I needed to know the truth behind this wretched thing I had brought into my home. I drew a trembling breath and approached the lamp once more, the air heavy with an electric tension. The glow flickered within its glass, pulsating like a heartbeat that was not mine. Compelled by dread and curiosity, I reached out and grasped the switch. As I clicked it off and on again, the atmosphere thickened, distorting reality itself. The lamp's light turned a sinister shade of yellow, bathing my apartment in a sickly glow, and the shadows whispered louder. No longer could I deny the presence. It was here, insistent, invading my mind with thoughts I dared not entertain. Through that flickering haze, figures began to form, horrible manifestations of my own nightmares. Faces twisted in agony appeared for moments in the shimmering gaslight, then vanished as quickly as they came. I fell back, nausea clawing at my gut. I wrestled with the truth. This lamp was a gateway to something malevolent, something that had lain in wait for its chance to reach me. The once innocent charms of my apartment vanished. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of unseen fabric became a threat. I began to hear soft cries mingled with laughter, taunting me in a language too ancient to comprehend. My only anchoring thought was to escape, but where could I run when my home had transformed into this oppressive dark maze? As I turned, the walls seemed to pulse, breathing alongside me, encasing me in this horror. My eyes caught a glimpse of movement, a reflection on the window. I rushed toward it, but saw nothing more than the distorted reflection of my own pale face. Panic surged through me. Behind me, the whispers had turned into a chorus, the air saturated with grotesque sensation. I spun just in time to see a wraith-like figure dart past my shoulder, too quick to focus on. The temperature plummeted, my breath coming out in ragged puffs like plumes of ghostly smoke. "Please," I murmured into the thickening darkness. "Enough." In response, the lamp shuddered violently, making the glass rattle ominously. Its light flickered thrice before a blinding flash illuminated the room. I shielded my eyes, and when I opened them again, the shadows had thickened to a palpable gloom, swirling, pulsating. The words of an old mantra, whispered through realms too dark to fathom, filled the air. Return what was taken. Return what was taken. I could almost feel the brush of cold fingers skimming my skin. A clammy, probing presence searching, seeking. It wanted something from me. The terror escalated when I realized my pulse throbbed in time with the rising chorus of whispers. With newfound horror, I understood the lamp was not merely an object. It was a vessel, and I had partaken in a dark communion. This was more than possession. Something was slowly claiming me, and I felt its tendrils reaching deep into my memories. I stumbled backwards, the room swirling as I struggled to shake free of its grasp. It was then that the lamp flickered one more time, and I caught a glimpse through its distorted light. Standing behind me, just beyond the threshold of the shadows, were faces each familiar, and each wretchedly trapped in an expression of despair. My family, my friends. They were calling out silently, their mouths moving urgently in the pulsating light. And before I could process the horror, the air around me thickened like a vice, and a chilling realization settled in my chest. This was bigger than me. I had unwittingly opened a door to darkness that craved not just my soul but the souls of everyone I had ever loved. As the shadows converged, I reached out in desperation, but it was too late. The lamp exploded in incandescent brilliance, and just as everything plunged into a deafening darkness, I heard one final whisper echo against my ear, a name. My name. And then came the laughter. The last moments of my sanity crumbled away, leaving nothing but the embers of fear as I vanished into the shadow's embrace, fully realizing I was not alone. No, I was never alone at all. The darkness concealed the chaos that unfolded as reality stretched ominously. I was ensconced in that void, teetering on the cusp of oblivion, when splintered memories whispered to me like echoes from a distant past. I was submerged, weightless yet bound by invisible chains. With hesitance, I opened my eyes, greeted by the remnants of the apartment, now a disjointed reflection of my own mind. The shadows sharpened around me, coiling possessively, pulling taut like elastic bands ready to snap. I could sense their intent, maliciously teasing the edges of my consciousness. Where had the lamp gone? A fading ember of light flickered somewhere in the depths, but somber shadows masked its glow, leaving me at their mercy. Panic surged within me, an antidote to the hollow stillness. I pushed myself off the cold. Wooden floor-me limbs felt foreign, heavy with a disquiet I couldn't shake. Staring into the mirror above the mantel, I beheld not just my reflection but a distorted visage that writhed and flickered like a flame, alive with the horrors I'd seen, the faces trapped behind the veil of shadows. They were watching, waiting, a silent judgment looming. I staggered away from the mirror, heart thundering in my ears, only for my foot to catch on something brittle. A scattering of brittle leaves underfoot crunched like bones breaking. They were remnants of life that had somehow found their way inside. Frantic, I glanced down to see not only leaves but dark, clumping knots of hair entwined with something else, clawed remnants that scraped against my ankle. Reeling from the revelation, I kicked wildly, but those remnants clung to me as if seeking warmth, a connection. With a resounding crash, the window shattered. Chunks of glass fell inward like rain, shards glittering menacingly against a backdrop of blackness. From the shattered frame, a breeze wound its way through, carrying with it an agonized wail that was at once monstrous and achingly familiar, burrowing under my skin. It was a specter of anguish unleashed from the depths of despair. I turned, my heart racing. "Who's there?" I screamed, but only the shadows responded, swelling and swirling as if to mock my insistence. The echoes of laughter, hollow and cruel, reverberated through the dimness, building a cacophony, daring me to discern who amongst them was real. Clutching my head to stifle the onslaught of panic, I stumbled backward, retreating until I hit the wall. It felt solid and yet pulsating, as if the very foundation of my home had succumbed to this malevolent force. I closed my eyes, searching for a way to calm my frazzled mind, but the shadows slipped through my fingertips, wispy and insistent. Suddenly, something cold grazed my neck, a palpable chill that froze my blood. My breath quickened as I turned to find a pale, ghostly hand reaching toward me, its fingers curling like skeletal vines. I was drawn to the familiar touch, a morbid familiarity that gnawed at the edges of my mind. I felt as though I was being pulled toward something that lay in wait, a sinister entity encroaching upon my very essence. "Help me," it whispered, the voice an echo of my own, tangled with someone else's desperate plea. I could hardly breathe. The tendrils of shadow spread further, gnawing at my resolve, urging me to answer. Was this a trick, another attempt to ensnare me? Yet, something deep within me stirred a kindness I had long buried under the weight of my loneliness and despair. Sobbing, I took a hesitant step forward, the shadows retreating slightly as though anticipating my approach. The air thickened, carrying the scent of decay, the quiet murmurs intensifying to a piercing shriek. I grasped the slowly brightening light emanating from the core of the void, a sliver of hope, desperate and debilitating. What if I reached for it, only to be consumed? But I could hear them again, the muffled cries of my family and friends, no longer silent witnesses through the veil, but voices merged in a desperate plea. "Save us," they echoed through the dark, each word a dagger that sliced through my heart. "Save us." Finding strength, I lunged toward the light, the ghostly fingers clawing at my clothes, tugging me back with all their might. I felt an acute sense of loss, an overwhelming urge to remember each face, each moment shared, each laugh that had once made me whole. Just as my fingers brushed the bright heart of clarity, everything shifted, and agony rippled through my limbs. The light burst forth, temporarily blinding me, illuminating grotesque shadows writhing around the edges. And then, in an instant, it flickered out, plunging me into the thickest of darkness as the laughter reached a fever pitch. And then there was an unsettling silence that I in that void. I felt something warm and slick slide down my army. Pulse slowed. I blinked, instinctively reaching out in fright. My fingers brushed something wet, not a liquid as expected, but a chill that seeped deep into my bones, a promise of despair. I couldn't find my voice nor the strength to return to the light. Somewhere within the terror, I could feel the malignant presence tightening its grip, hunger laced through the chilling air. And a single phrase coalesced from the shadows, winding around my consciousness until it resonated deep within. "You have awakened what was better left sleeping." A dread vision flowered in my mind, a final flicker of illumination urging me to confront the truth of what I had unleashed. But as the horror of realization rooted itself within me, a new presence emerged. A reflection from the depth of the shadows surged forth, bearing my own visage yet twisted in mirrors of anguish, the laughter now singular and shrill, wrapping around me like a shroud. And then I remembered what I had forgotten, who had been lost in the darkness while I was swallowed whole. The jarring thud of something heavy crashing to the floor echoed through the apartment. And I knew the truth would surface soon, but it was not just me that was at stake. With a burst of desperate resolve, a spark ignited within me. I had to find a way back, to claw through this insidious shroud, to grasp the hope that was slipping from my fingers. But just as I took that first trembling step, something whispered from behind, slithering softly against my ear, "You won't be taking anything back because they belong to me now." And that was the moment the dark laughed again, as if taunting my every decision, pulling tighter, until all I could see was a blinding fissure of malignant energy threatening to consume me whole this time, with no chance of escape. The laughter echoed like a malignant heartbeat, pulsating through the depth of my bones. No longer faint and distant, it now wrapped around me, suffocating yet enthralling, mingling the energies of both dread and resignation. I staggered, knowing every fleeting second was leading me toward a horror I could scarcely comprehend, like an unwelcome traveler in a twisted tale. The shadows danced hungrily at the corner of my vision, and I swore I could hear whispers churning in their depths, disjointed fragments of despair woven into a tapestry of suspense. Struggling to gather my wits, I turned my gaze to where the floor met the walls, watching in terror as the shadows twisted and elongated into figures, suggestion and silhouette lurking just as my superficial reality dimmed even further. "Where are you?" I croaked, the words curdling on my tongue, thick with fear. I recognized the gnarled contours of despair before me, but they morphed into soft, echoing tremors in the dark. I reached out, desperation coursing through my veins, but what met my fingers felt solid yet ghastly. Parchment-thin flesh stretched over brittle bones, quivering under my touch. I recoiled as the apparition shuddered back, revealing an emaciated face-me mother's face, yet aged and tortured, a crucible of suffering. Her eyes blackened with sorrow, brightened with nightmares. "You became lost," she sobbed, breathless, spectral hands gripping the air like a tightrope walker on the edge of nothingness. "You must leave. They won't release you, Mother." My voice cracked, a splintered whisper that barely escaped my lips. I wanted to rush forward, to grasp her, to show her my love. A fierce resolve surged within me, but the shadows constricted, elongating into a serpentine form, slithering between us with a promise of splitting silencia. Hunger awakened. She turned, her mouth agape, screaming silently as though a great weight bore down upon her. I could see it now, the clowning shadows morphing into a legion of tortured souls, twisting out of ancient knots of anguish, their faces flickering like melted candle wax, adapting and transforming into figures I had lost. The mounting terror crackled in the air, sending jolts through my spine. The flickering lights began to pulse menacingly, creating grotesque patterns against the walls. I was surrounded by lost echoes, faces I recognized but had long forgotten, each a confession, each a plea for liberation. The apartment was no longer mine. It was a Mausoluma gallery of anguish. "They are trapped with you, darling," a voice hissed from the depths of the now living darkness. It was a voice I recognized, a guttural whisper fraying at the edges. My hands trembled as the malevolence surged, wrapping around my throat. "And together, you shall remain forever," a palindrome-like. It morphed and slithered, weaving the tapestry of anguish tighter, forcing my heart to synchronize with the rhythm of despair. I hurriedly turned back to my mother's apparition, my heart now tethered to her fragile existence. "You must go," I screamed, but the shadows were pulling me deeper, each flickering ounce of light diminishing like burnt-out embers. But then I felt a surge of warmth in the cold expanse of despair. Frantically, I clawed toward my mother's figure. "Tell me how to save you," I begged, my voice erupting like a fragile glass in the dark. "Seek the lamp, find its true heart," she rasped, and in that fleeting moment, a glimmer of sanity pierced through the chaos. "The lamp holds in an instant," a deafening roar erupted, drowning her words beneath the avalanche of shadows. I was ripped away from her, limbs flailing against unbearable pressure as if 1,000 hands sought to ensnare me. Fatigue gnawed at my mind, crumbling the edges like the once firm foundation beneath my feet. The floor teetered beneath me, and without warning, I found myself flung backward into an abyss cascading into darkness. Memory spun wild. Every painful laugh, every tear bled together in a mosaic of heartache. The lamp rose in my consciousness like a beacon flickering in the night, a desperate salvation. Bring it back, my mother's voice echoed again. The shadows struggling, diverging around the horror at hand. You must return, but just then, I hit the ground, landing sprawled among splintered glass and darkness, the remnants of my former life scattered like autumn leaves. Struggling to comprehend the queasy reality, I glanced around and saw a lamp, dark and brooding among the debris. Its presence loomed like a malevolent guardian waiting to grant a wish or a curse. Take it. The voices screamed in unison, blending into a ghastly symphony. But as I crawled toward it, the shadows pooled menacingly, coiling like serpentine tendrils around my wrist to drag me back. I glanced back, horrified to see the faces of the departed stretching across the darkness, mouths open in agonizing pleas. You cannot grasp what you seek. And just as the shadows tightened their grip, pulling me down into despair, I reached for the lamp, knowing that in one way or another, its truth would be unleashed, even if it would cost me my soul. The moment my fingers brushed the cold metal surface, a surge of frigid air rushed through me, snuffing out the last flickers of warmth. The lamp stirred to life as if it was awakening from a slumber unbroken for centuries. But at that moment, laughter erupted anew, a cacophony of horrific mirth, then echo circling back around me, suffocating all thoughts of escape. And in the thrumming pulse of darkness, a voice broke through, dripping with malicious delight. This is only the beginning, and with one final stroke of fate, as the world around me drew into an intense spiral of uncertainty, everything and everyone began to unravel. The shadows writhed as the air thickened with a palpable dread, constricting around me like the grip of a long-forgotten nightmare, an echo clawing at the threads of my sanity. I barely had a moment to comprehend the lamp's awakening. The light flickered dimly before exploding into a blinding surge, colors melding into something grotesque and alien. Every flicker seemed to pulse with the rhythm of my heart, each heartbeat ensnared in a cacophony of festering laughter. I squinted against the blinding brightness and illumination so sharp it felt as if it could cut through the fabric of my very soul. In its hazy radiance, the twisted faces materialized again, horrified combinations of remorse and vengeance circling, flitting beyond my reach. Their cries became a mournful chorus of agony, merging seamlessly with the frenetic whispers of the shadows as they surged around me. Release us, they wailed, an unending lament weaving through the monologue of terror in my mind. He has imprisoned us for too long. Each tormented face carried the weight of the countless souls trapped within the lamp's mysterious grasp. It was a prison forged from anguish, torment, and desperation. A cruel mockery of hope sitting innocuously in my world, an unassuming artifact of malevolence that had twisted my very existence into a never-ending nightmare. I struggled to take a breath, each inhale a battle against the choking atmosphere. My fingers felt against the cold metal, tracing the etched patterns of despair, a series of hieroglyphs that whispered secrets of ancient pain. I was losing myself, swirling deeper into an abyss that beckoned with the promise of becoming more than human, of knowing more than one should. Non nobis, domini. A voice resounded from behind the lamp, growing clearer with each frantic pulse of light. The shadows seemed to recoil, the phantom laughter fading, leaving only an oppressive silence in their wake. Yet it was a silence laced with something darker, something malignant that slithered in the gaps between thoughts. Who are you? My voice cracked, though somehow asking the question felt utterly pointless in this realm stripped of reason. The disparity of existing between grotesque forms and astonishing revelations was becoming unbearable. Your salvation and your doom. The voice quavered with a theatrical flourish, and for the first time, I could see a face emerging from the consuming darkness, a face I recognized all too well. Do you not remember? Like a gnarled tree emerging from the roots of torment, the figure of my father stepped forward, etched by the passing years, his once handsome visage twisted by despair, reflecting a life stolen by regret. Father? My heart jerked, the emotion clawing fiercely. Is it really you? You have unlocked the door, he hissed, his lips curling in a grotesque smile. But what lies beyond is far worse than either of us can imagine. The shadows roared to life again, flaring with furious energy, threatening to engulf me as his laughter morphed, becoming indistinguishable from the sounds of torment. Now that you have touched the lamp, your fate is entwined with the forgotten. You shall witness their eternity as your own. I shook my head violently, wrenching away from the grip of his gaze. No, this can't be real. I want to go back. Back? He laughed, a sound hollow and cavernous, echoing like a dirge from below the earth. There is no returning, only the descent. You are ours now, the harbinger of their torment. You will know every moment of their anguish. With that, the shadows surged forward, organic in their malevolence, grasping at me, dragging me down inexorably into the torment only foretold. I felt the tendrils around me tighten, pulling away the last vestiges of light and hope, the walls of my existence collapsing into themselves. You must still choose. My father bellowed against the encroaching darkness, his form flickering like a flame threatened by the wind. Ultimately, what will you sacrifice, the past, or a future of terror carved in shadows? And then, amid the grasping shadows and the grasp of despair, I saw its shimmering reflection of the lamp held tightly in my father's skeletal hand, now entwined with chains forged from despair. My heart raced. Could this lamp unlock any salvation? At that moment, a voice purred from the very depths of the shadows, a knowing, sinister whisper that entwined around my senses. You already know the answer. Dear traveler, only one must walk this path. Make your choice or be consumed. As the shadows closed in on me, tightening like a noose, I felt the chilling truth seep beneath my skin. Everything I had ever known teetered on the brink of irreversible consequence. And there, in the grasp of unending darkness, a revelation gripped me harder than any terror I had ever known. To save or to sacrifice was a choice I thought I could make, but one I would regret forever. And with that thought, the world shattered. The shards of reality splintered as I fell through a chasm of nothingness. Emotions ran raw, each feeling clawing at the remnants of my sanity. I floated in an abyss, unmoored from time. My senses shot through with the jagged memories of my father and those damned souls trapped in the lamp. There was no light, no ground, only an echoing laughter that morphed into dirges of despair, wrapping around me with treacherous affection. Suddenly, I landed, not with a crash, but with a bizarre grace that felt unnatural. I stood in a dimly lit room, the air thick with mildew and sorrow. The walls were draped in the same worn, peeling wallpaper that had adorned my childhood home. Only now it appeared to be bleeding shadows, weaving tales of despair as if every tear was an eye weeping. It suffocated me, an atmosphere ripe with the stench of forgotten memories that coalesced into a tangible terror. As I turned, a figure emerged from the shadows, flickering like a dying candle flame. It was my mother, her face drawn and lined with the weight of abandonment. You've brought him back, haven't you? She whispered, the words fragile yet filled with bitterness. Mother, I stammered, confusion flooding my mind like hot adrenaline. I didn't what? She interrupted, her voice rising with trembling fury. Didn't realize the cost? This isn't a reunion. It's a curse. Her gaze flickered over my shoulder, and the unmistakable sound of chains rattling filled the air. A resonance that crept under my skin. I followed her fearful gaze, and my heart dropped. A grotesque tableau unfolded, spectral forms twisted with anguish, clawing toward me as if released from some unseen prison. Their faces contorted in relentless agony. Mouths shaped into silent screams echoed with the burden of lost hopes. No, I stumbled back, but my feet found no solid ground, sinking into what felt like an oily surface. My surroundings transformed into a nightmarish hell, a warped version of my childhood home where laughter once resonated but now was stripped bare, exposed to the gnashing of teeth and shrieks of despair. Why are you here? My mother's voice quaked, stirring the rancid air. Why did you awaken him? Who? I don't know. I cried out, a pulse of grief tightening around my throat. I just wanted to understand. I thought what? She answered, now stepping closer, her eyes transforming into hollow voids that threatened to consume me. That you could heal the scars of this family? We are trapped, and you are the final link. He is coming for you. Before I could respond, the walls trembled, and the room flickered again, revealing new horrors. Shadows twisted into shapes, nocturnal creatures clawing at the barriers between worlds, bridging the gap between realms known and unknown. They surrounded me, speaking in sinister whispers that held promises of knowledge unfathomable. Come to us, traveler, the voices beckoned, seductive and mocking. Your fate is entwined with the forgotten. Embrace what you fear, or despair will consume your very essence. In a moment of desperation, I lunged for the lamp, now glowing ominously atop a rickety table in the center of the room. The light flickered in sickly hues, casting long shadows that danced around me like a carnival of the damned. But as my fingers brushed its surface, a rush of images assaulted my mind, images of countless souls bound in torment. Their pained eyes overwhelming me with the weight of their fear. I can set you free, I gasped, trying to drown out the cacophony. But their laughter grew louder, a crescendo that rattled my bones. Set us free? Our fate is yours to decide. One voice, guttural and ancient, whispered close to my ear. You will become one of us, submerged in our torment. No, I shouted, feeling hopelessness wrap around me, squeezing tighter than the shadows. But the moment stretched into eternity, and with every passing second, I could feel the chains of despair pulling tighter, craving my surrender with renewed determination. Preparing to shatter the lamp's hold, I turned back, only to find my mother vanishing into the dark, silhouette being devoured by the shadows that clamored for her. No, come back. I reached out, but she dissolved into the void, leaving only shards of sorrow in her wake. The spectral figures surged toward me, furious and unrelenting, their screams intertwining with my thoughts, forming a monstrous symphony of despair. Sacrifice your past, or embrace your family's fate, they shrieked, a chaotic symphony of sorrow sounding in one horrific breath. Time slowed, the air thickening with desperation, and I was left with only one agonizing choice. With trembling hands, I gripped the lamp tightly, bracing myself against the oncoming tide. As the shadows enveloped the room, I heard one final whisper, so laced with promise it made my skin crawl. Embrace the darkness, traveler. The true horror is just beginning. And the world spiraled again, a kaleidoscope of agony, leaving me teetering on the brink of a reality I may never escape. The light dimmed to a pinprick as shrieks echoed around me, a malevolent promise lingering just out of sight, dissolving like smoke through my fingers. Then there was silence, and the abyss awaited. As the silence smothered the room, my heart raced, pulse throbbing in my ears like a warning bell. I was suspended in darkness, disoriented and lost in the chasms of despair that yawned around me. Yet, deep within, I sensed the haunting threads of a presence tugging on the frayed edges of my sanity. A malevolence swirled patiently, beckoning, waiting for the moment to strike. Slowly, the shadows around me shifted, coiling like snakes, inviting me to uncover their secrets. I felt a whisper against my skin, cold and insistent, curling around my ankles, urging me to move deeper into the dark. A new vision emerged, suddenly brightening the void of memory of childhood like an unwanted echo that clashed against the cacophony of the damned. I end that fragmented thought. I found myself standing in the hallway of my old home. The wallpaper remained unchanged, a ghostly reflection of the peeling patterns I remembered so well. I followed the sound of a child's laughter, sweet and innocent, weaving through the rooms, leading me to the dining area where the scent of freshly baked bread filled the air. But the tableau morphed before my eyes. The laughter shifted into a high-pitched cackle, and the warmth of the bread turned rancid. Before me, the table collapsed into a mass of twisted limbs, young, innocent faces contorted with fear and sorrow, all staring at me with wide, pleading eyes. My hands trembled as I reached out, wanting to comfort them, yet recoiling in horror as I felt the coldness of death around them. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the encroaching shadows, desperate to reclaim my sanity. The faces melted, dissolving into blackened ichor, their hollow eyes replaced by tumbling specters trapped in an endless waltz of agony. They spun around me, their voices rising in volume, drowning my thoughts in a cacophony that gnawed at the corners of my mind. "We are the ones you forgot," they chanted, each note dripping with despair. "The ones you abandoned. How dare you try to escape your fate?" I staggered backward, slamming into the wall, sending a shockwave through the decaying timber. The shadows twisted and writhed, morphing into a massive figure looming before me, a shadow so raw and palpable it felt like an entity constructed from pure dread. "Your sacrifice opened the door, traveler," the shadow rumbled, its voice echoing like thunder through a violent storm. "You cannot turn back now." The path forward, a shriek pierced the air, cutting through the thunderous rumble of the creature. Turning, I caught a glimpse of a woman wreathed in shadows, ethereal and luminous, a flicker of hope among the despair. "Help us," she cried, stretching out her hand, a connection woven through the threads of fate. But before I could respond, the shadow lunged forward, absorbing her into its mass. "No!" I screamed, desperation clutching my throat like a vice. But all I received was a haunting silence that echoed the void around me. The specter loomed larger, its form shifting and flowing like liquid darkness, a harbinger of destruction that demanded my surrender. "The lamp binds you to us. It is your beacon and your curse," it rasped, the words laced with a hunger that echoed in the bellies of the damned. "Your past has taken the form of a nightmare, a cycle that cannot be broken. Accept it." The walls shivered with malevolence, whispering remnants of my mother's warnings. "I won't accept this," I shouted defiantly, the fire of resistance flickering weakly in my chest. But my defiance seemed to invigorate the shadow, swelling with strength as it drew closer, overwhelming me with its insatiable hunger as it wrapped its presence around me. I began to see flashes of other worlds, terrible, twisted reflections of reality that filled with terror and despair. Each glimpse sent icy fingers of dread clawing through my heart. Souls trapped in limbo sought madly to escape, their anguished cries mixing with the sinister laughter, a cacophony that punctured my very essence. With a surge of adrenaline, I turned and bolted through the flooded hallway. The floor felt like treacle beneath my feet, desperate to pull me back into the darkness. I could feel the shadow pursuing me, an overwhelming mass of fury in relentless pursuit. But the need to uncover the truth propelled me ahead. Reaching the parlor, the room flickered, shifting again as spectral flames danced through the hearth, illuminating the walls adorned with family portraits that began to sway and twist, faces of loved ones contorted into grotesque mockeries, eyes devoid of recognition, mouths curling into sneers. "Forgive me," I cried out to them, but they offered no solace, only the oppressive weight of their disappointment. "I can fix this," and suddenly, I was thrust into the center of a swirling maelstrom, the very fabric of reality unraveling before me. As I struggled against the tide, a voice, smooth and enticing, curled around my consciousness. "Embrace the fate of your family, traveler. Only then can you truly understand." As the words resonated deep within my soul, I glimpsed the flickering light of the lamp, pulsating forcefully, beckoning me back. My heart raced, a cacophony of emotions boiling over, fear, determination, desperation colliding in a maelstrom that it became a choice. Face the dark maw of despair or see what lay in the light. But before I could decide, the shadows surged around me, whispering secrets meant for my ears only, their maddening promise locking around my mind like chains. "Choose," they hissed, "or perish." And then, in a heartbeat, the ground fell away, plunging me into the depths of a reality I could not escape, where the past, present, and future tangled into an eternal spiral of horror, and at its center lay the glaring truth of my family's curse. In that moment, I began to scream, but it was drowned out by the laughter, the insidious, unforgiving laughter echoing through the darkness as it surrounded me. Then came a thunderous crack followed by absolute silence as the abyss opened beneath me, ready to consume every fragment of my being. The void swallowed me whole, a darkness so complete that time lost all meaning. Like a moth drawn to the relentless pull of flame, I fell endlessly, tumbling through despairing fragments of my existence. Shards of memory flanked my descent, each a haunting visage. Laughter that resonated with the cold grip of fear, tender embraces twisted into desperate pleas for salvation, Moments that felt achingly familiar yet suffocatingly alien. With a jolt, I landed hard against wooden floorboards, the impact jarring enough to snap me back to reality, but not enough to dispel the choking haze of terror that cloaked me. I blinked rapidly, allowing my eyes to adjust to an unsettling twilight. I found myself in an eerily familiar roomy childhood bedroom, draped in a shroud of dust and dread. An ancient rocking chair swayed ominously in the corner, and chilling fingerprints marred the walls. Remnants of a presence that clung to the very air. With each clatter of the chair, my heart raced, pounding in sync with the echoes of forgotten laughter. "No," I whispered, scrambling to my feet, desperate to dispel the venomous energy that seeped into my skin, urging me to succumb to its dark embrace. "This can't be real." But the whispering shadows hung around me, thickening like smoke, and from the corner of my eye, I glimpsed a fleeting silhouette, pale and fleeting, disappearing into the essence of the old, peeling wallpaper. "Run," the figure mouthed, a silent scream that lanced through my heart. Before I registered its meaning, a tremor rippled through the floor, and my vision blurred as the room morphed, walls bending and warping, colors bleeding into one another in a sickening whirl. I was thrust into the parlor again, but something was dreadfully different. The fireplace roared with unholy flames, each flicker revealing visions of anguish. Distorted faces reached out through the flames, mouthing silent cries for mercy. A voice, eerily akin to the woman before, echoed softly in the background. "Save us!" I staggered back, pressed hard against the wall, eyes darting around for an escape. Yet the haunting chants of lost souls encircled me like a fever dream, tugging at the very fabric of my sanity. They shrieked their sorrow, their voices unified in a nauseating harmony. "The lamp binds you. It knows your sins. Why did I ever take it home? Why did I think I could wield its power?" My breath hitched as I felt the unmistakable presence of the shadow returning, not as a mere figment of fear, but as a palpable entity, coiling closer, feeding on my terror. "Face your heritage," it bellowed, the very walls trembling beneath its enormity. "You are their chosen whisperer, the one to awaken the past. Will you defy your claim?" I turned away, but the room was a prison morphing into a grotesque theater of suffering and loss. I cringed as phantoms of my past flickered before my family gatherings where laughter once flourished, shattered by the weight of betrayal and regret. Figures danced, but they twisted on the edge of madness. My mother, with haunted eyes, lost in a trance, reaching out yet never closing the distance. "Your heritage is blood," the shadow hissed, "and it demands allegiance." That I grasped the lamp, the swirling metal cool against my palm, as inexplicable energy vibrated through it. In panic, I turned it, hoping against hope that it would emit light and banish the looming dark. Instead, a tremor coursed through my fingers, and a crack ran through the lamp's base, unleashing a flood of shadows that erupted from it, crawling up my arms, skimming across my skin with icy tendrils, whispering promises of eternity. I screamed, wrenching it free, but the shadows hardened into chains, lashed across my wrists, pulling with an unyielding strength. Desperate to resist, I plunged forward, striking the wall with my shoulder, hoping for reprieve. But the room enveloped me further in its growing madness. From the depths of the shadows, a gateway yawned open, a swirling vortex inviting my fears and memories to spill forth. Faces swarmed within each, taunting my existence, their whispers melding into a singular entity, a chorus of rage and pain that clawed at my heart. "Embrace your family's fate, for you have awakened what remained hidden. Become one of us, or lose everything." A flicker of recognition surged within me. The very souls once united had now turned into an abyss of vengeful energy, all tethered to the lamp that I had so thoughtlessly brought into my life. With despair choking me, I lunged toward the opening, feeling the magnetic pull of truth drawing me closer. Every moment seemed to stretch out, elongating my torment. But before I could cross the threshold into that darkness, the shadow surged forward, its voice booming with fury and despair. "You will not escape the bloodline. You will remain with us, swallowed whole by the shade of your lineage." And in that moment of chaos, reality itself warped yet again, fracturing around me like glass. From the broken pieces emerged a visionary reflection, distorted with agony, laughing hollowly, each chuckle reverberating with chilling familiarity. And then, without warning, the world cracked wide open beneath my feet once more, plunging me into a despair I thought I could not survive. With that dark laugh still echoing in my ears, I plummeted into nothingness, reaching out for the light that might not exist, knowing that whatever lay beyond was just as likely to consume me as it was to save me. I awoke again on unforgiving wood, the air heavy with the acrid scent of burnt memories. This time, the familiar sensations of dread slithered through me like a serpent, its cold coil winding tighter. I lay in a space that was no longer my childhood bedroom but a vast expanse of darkened corridors, their walls pulsating like the heartbeat of a giant beast. A flickering bulb dangled from the ceiling above, struggling against darkness like a dying ember, casting long shadows that danced maliciously at the edges of my vision. I pushed myself up, only to realize that I was not alone. Figures loomed in the gaps of darkness, their silhouettes distorted, features hidden beneath the layers of despair. They stood silent and still, but I could sense their anticipation, a quiet hunger for what I might reveal. "You cannot hide from us," a voice hissed, slithering through the air like smoke. It belonged to no one yet echoed of many murmurs of lost siblings, of a father's disappointment, of a mother's haunting regrets. Suddenly, the ground shook, eliciting a chorus of whispers that grew louder, resonating with fervor. "Face us?" Heart hammering, I stumbled back, my palms slick against the rough wooden walls, but they were shaking too, vibrating with an energy that reverberated with my own fears. I rushed down the corridor, following instinct, every step sinking deeper into relentless night. As I moved, doors began to materialize, each one marked with a name from my past, etched in a far more grotesque script than I ever remembered. Each name whispered its own tale of woe, begging for acknowledgement. "Open me," one door implored. "Confront what you fear." With no choice left but despairing curiosity, I flung the door wide open. Inside, a room spun with color and light, surreal and frenzied, where time twisted and warped like a mad painter's canvas. In its center lay a table, adorned with items I recognized from family gatherings: a chipped plate of cookies, a worn-out game of Monopoly, an aging family portrait frozen in a moment of joy. But the gleeful echoes turned sour as soon as I stepped in. The faces from the portrait shifted, their smiles dissolving into anguished expressions as they slowly receded, turning away from me as if I were to blame for their misery. "You left us," they chanted, ghostly voices intertwining, each syllable a reminder of my abandonment. "You let the darkness consume you. Join us or become one with the void." The walls began to close in, closing off my only escape, gravitational force compelling me toward the center, where an insatiable tick-tock sounded from the shadows, a metronome of anguish shifting relentlessly. Then, I heard the unmistakable sound of scratching, like fingernails raking against the wood from somewhere beyond the walls. A low keening rose with each scrapey, a symphony of desperation laced with anger and betrayal. "Help us," it pleaded, an echo of my childhood fears manifesting in a terrifying crescendo. My heart raced in trepidation as another door swung open, this time revealing a mirror. I gazed into its reflective surface, searching for anything that could anchor me to reality. But the image looking back was eldritch, eyes sunken, skin pulled taut against bone. Behind me, shadows writhed, whispering my shortcomings, dredging up memories I fought to forget. "Your sins have followed you," the voice echoed once more, colder than the air surrounding me. "You cannot excise them, you can only join them." Suddenly, the floor beneath me cracked with an ominous split. Tendrils of darkness gushed forth, writhing and slithering like snakes, racing at my feet, rising up my legs in a suffocating embrace, filling me with dread. "No, I won't let them take me." In a fierce surge of will, I wrenched my body free, stumbling backwards. But just as I turned to flee, the mirror exploded in a cacophony of shards, raining down around me like dark-hearted jewels, each piece reflecting the faces I had long wanted to forget. I lunged through the door, slamming it behind me, but it cracked back open as if inviting the darkness trapped. Beyond, Chilling laughter echoed, voices harmonizing together in a wicked delight. You cannot run. We are part of you. I dashed down another corridor, panic flooding my veins, the shadows lengthening, their tendrils reaching and brushing against my skin, a promise of empowerment mixed with a chilling threat. Then came the tumbling sound of something heavy, rhythmic footsteps pounding toward me from both directions. I was engulfed in a cacophony of oppressive noise, the dark feeding on my heightened fear. Heart sinking, I pressed onward, desperate for salvation or salvation's semblance. Ahead, an exit loomed, illuminated by a harsh neon glow that made shadows retreat. But as I raced toward it, time warped once more, stretching endlessly, the light growing dimmer and dimmer. Just as I reached for the threshold, a cold hand grabbed my shoulder, twisting me around. A face materialized, familiar yet obscured, tears of ash trailing down ghostly cheeks. You cannot leave without us, we are your forever. That moment froze, time shattering my will as the darkness surged around us like a tidal wave, engulfing me whole before the door could close. The last thing I heard was the echo of my own scream melding with the shadows, swallowed into eternal night. I stepped onto what felt like an abyss, a terrifying spiral of memory and shadows, the world around me unraveling into nothingness as I fell upward, landing harshly on the wooden floor of my apartment. This time, everything felt off, the air thick with ghostly whispers that slithered around my limbs, coagulating into familiar shapes, faces contorted in anguish. I staggered to my feet, disoriented, dread constricting my chest, and no light illuminated the room, just a suffocating darkness thickening with every breath I took. Above me, the lamp glowed faintly, an ominous beacon pulsating with an unearthly rhythm. I reached for it instinctively. Perhaps it held the key, the promise of understanding. But as I approached, an agonized scream echoed around me, sharp and raw. A cry that felt mirrored within the very seams of my being, a sound that resonated with the guilt that had festered over years, haunting me. Oh, I gasped. What do you want from me? From the shadows emerged a figure, one that I couldn't ignore, a mirror image of myself, twisted and broken. You've called upon darkness, it croaked, voice warped with mockery, and now it calls home your home. That I recoiled, stumbling back. This can't be real. You're not me. Reality is what you make it, the specter hissed, shadows billowing around it like fog. You awakened it, you've unleashed the forgotten. And they hunger. Everything I believed ripped apart around me. I didn't mean to, I shouted, trying to block out the essence of what I had begun. It was just a lamp, a stupid lamp, but the echoes of my argument fell flat amid the rising cacophony of tortured whispers. They were my family, their lament still within the air like morbid smoke. Yet, a new clarity gripped my heart, the memories swirled through me. A raging tempest of faces begging from beyond, drowned in despair. Those voices were not merely echoes. They were the very lifeblood of my choices, every moment binding my fate tighter as I clutched onto the tangled threads of memory. Something flickered beneath the surface of my awareness, a truth lurking in the shadows like a knife ready to stab. My family, my past, it was all tied to me. I had inherited this darkness, this burden that bound me to the lamp, tied me to the curse. The unknowing vessel had absorbed them all, and oh, I screamed, feeling the tendrils of darkness snake around my wrists, cold and clammy. I will not be your vessel. I refuse, with every ounce of strength. I lunged for the lamp, its surface cold and slick against my palm. A spark ignited, instantly light erupted forth, illuminating the room with a spectral glow that pushed against the encroaching darkness. But just as quickly, the shadows whirled in agitation, coiling tighter, clawing against the light with palpable rage. You dare challenge us? The amalgamation of anguished voices beckoned, rising like a tide. You are ours. Not anymore, I shouted resolutely, fueling the light with every fearful memory I could muster, the faces of those I loved and lost urging me on, channeling my will. I forced the origins of my deepest regrets to the forefront. You will not take me. But just as I faced the surging dark, a piercing rift split the room. A door I didn't know existed materialized behind the lamp, shimmering radiant. Something about it felt familiar and awfully foreboding. The lamp pulsed violently, reflecting the moments of pain. The laughter turned to agony. The stories cut short, and yet, beyond the door lay an unfinished tale, one that begged to be told. I stood at the edge of that doorway, poised between freedom and a legacy bound in shadows. What lies beyond? I whispered, torn by an insatiable desire for answers buried deep within me. You already know, the specter whispered, its voice honeyed and enticing. Embrace your family's destiny. You must choose, with a chilling realization. A memory flickered vividly. The lamp's history, the previous owner, the tale woven in tragedy. I knew the legends, the unfulfilled promises of those lost to despair, chained to a past that refused to let go. Each thread pulled on my heartstrings, weaving themselves into the fabric of my family's legacy, and I understood, the stories of the lamp were my stories. This is a choice, I said breathlessly, adrift in the knowledge that no matter the path, I was bound to the truth in ways I could never unravel. The grotesque faces surrounding me twisted in expectation. I can protect them. I can end this. As the shadows paused, swirling around me, suspended in a moment, I felt Ida warmth spreading through my chest. A sense of belonging enveloped me, wrapping me closer to those I had been separated from. Those who had lingered for far too long in silence. I stepped inside, crossing the threshold into the doorway as an explosion of memories flooded my mind, illuminating the darkness as they merged the life, love, laughter, and ultimately, the sorrow that had birthed this malevolence. The light consumed me, shattering all fear into fragments that I choose to remember. I whispered, and in that moment, a scream erupted, a cacophonous wail that echoed through the realms of the forgotten, vibrating through every layer of the universe. Specters blurred together, silhouettes melting into a maelstrom of light and darkness clashing, as if locking in an eternal struggle. Their voices screeched, threatening to drown me again. But I stood resolute, holding on to love and memory, forging my own fate anew. The shadows clutched at me, clawing back into the depths, yet I remained unyielding, grounding myself deeper in the light that pulsed through me. Then came the moment of shocking Clarissa, sudden truth crashing down like thunder. Though I had chosen to embrace my history, the spiral of horror had merely found a new vessel to inhabit. A flicker of dread clawed at my heart, realizing that I was the new keeper of this darkness, hovering on the precipice of a cycle unbroken. The fate I wished to protect was now my own. The light receded, but I no longer felt fear. Instead, the familiarity of darkness seeped into my soul, wrapping itself around me like an old friend, whispering promises of power and kinship. And though the memories remained, the shadows loomed with new intent as I turned back toward the remnants of my family. I held the lamp high, igniting the truths once concealed. "Welcome home," I said, and a chilling laugh erupted, a sharp, haunting reverberation ascending into the void. The shadows embraced me, swirling in delight, a new chapter unfolding with every flicker of light. And as the echoes faded, a single voice pierced the veil, intimate and knowing, whispering against my ear, "You've taken your place among the forgotten, and our tale begins anew."